Okay, we'll start with maths because that's my favourite. So in maths, there are 9 content domains. I'm sure lots of you have seen this before. So we've had 6 sets of SATs papers since the new curriculum came out. And these are 9 content domains. And I've analysed the proportion of the paper that's taken up by each content domain. So that's across all 3 papers, the arithmetic and both the reasoning. Now, obviously, the arithmetic paper is purely calculations and FDP. So that's all fractions, decimals and percentages. So that's already going to make those a bit bigger anyway. But you can quite clearly see here that calculations has been consistently the most common topic since 2016, with the next most common being fractions, decimals and percentages. In fact, collectively this year, it took up nearly 60% of the paper just from those content domains.
Wow.
So had the lowest pass mark this year at 51%. So quite interestingly, theoretically, to pass the maths SATs paper is possible by exclusively knowing content from calculations and FDP. Obviously, you'd have to get most of the questions correct, but it just goes to show how much of the paper is actually dedicated towards those 2 content domains. If you break it down by year group, again, nearly 60% of the questions from all 3 papers within the maths set are from the years 3, 4 and 5 curricula. So again, theoretically, it's possible to pass the maths paper without even touching the year 6 curriculum, which I always think
blows me away, that. Yeah,
it just goes to show, and I know all Key Stage 2 teachers say, it goes to show how important the earlier years are when it comes to building on ready for year 6. So again, it's safe to assume that next year the same content domains are going to appear in a similar proportion. So the 4 operations and FDP, which we know come up loads in the papers just from looking through them, but it's quite nice to see it in numbers to show how much of the paper is actually dedicated to it. And I can never fit in the whole curriculum before May, particularly this year. It's going to be a real challenge. So I always think if I've got to leave topics till after SAT, it's going to be your position and direction and your statistics and things that don't really come up very much. So that's the maths paper. With the grammar paper, the 2 most common content domains are G1 and G5. So again, since 2016, this has pretty much been the case. G1 being grammatical terms or word classes and G5 being punctuation. So again, I think actually the same pass mark as maths. It was 51% pass mark this year. So again, theoretically, it would be possible to pass that paper just from those 2 content domains. I know obviously that's quite a reach again, because they'd have to answer every single question correct, but also goes to show how much of the paper is dedicated to those 2 content domains. And yeah, I think it'll probably repeat a similar pattern next year. Punctuation and word classes, grammatical terms seems to be, really popular amongst the papers. So really practicing those is key. And then we've got reading, which is obviously a little bit trickier to analyse reading, nowhere near as nice and neat as maths and grammar, because anyone that's done SATs papers for more than a year will know that inference is huge in reading papers, and actually this year took up nearly half of the paper just from inference questions. But we all know that just because you teach a lesson on inference on a text about frogs doesn't mean the children are any better at answering inference questions about something else. So this one is a little bit trickier, but it's just interesting to know, I don't know, the kind of question stems that might be thrown to the children, and what impression do you get is quite a common one. So that's usually an inference type question. So exposing children to the question stems can be handy. But yeah, retrieval and inference are the most common when it comes to reading. And then looking at the word counts was quite interesting as well. So I think this year was the second wordiest paper, just looking at the words on the extracts rather than the questions. So you can see since 2016, I've got the total of the word counts at the bottom. And then my favourite bit of analysis, which is the genre of the text, because anyone that came last year, and I probably said the year before on Twitter, I've been convinced that a poetry extract is going to appear on a SATs paper, probably like since 2019, because I thought, especially there's been a big emphasis on poetry these last couple of years. And as you can see, poetry is in blue. It's only come up once in 2018. Every other year we've had 2 fiction extracts, and we usually have 1 non-fiction. So I think I said this last year, I'll eat my hat if poetry does not appear next year. I just feel like it has to. So if you want to focus your revision anywhere for reading, maybe chuck in an extra poem than you might have done before. That's what I'm going to do anyway.
Or next year, we will definitely start this webinar with Sophie eating a hat.
Yes, perhaps. So yeah, that is the analysis for reading. So I think for the kind of the key takeaways for all of those, is for maths, focusing on your four operations and FTP, grammar, focusing on punctuation and grammatical terms and word classes, and then just having in your head that for reading, any retrieval skills and inference question stems would be important to focus on, and possibly, surely, poetry.